But this week, we are continuing in our series that we call Supreme. Now, the idea behind this series is a journey through the book of Hebrews, and we are looking at this banner theme in the book of Hebrews that is this: Jesus is over all things because Jesus is God. And this book, written a long time ago, was written to a group of people who believed in Jesus, but were still trying to figure out what that belief in Jesus and Jesus himself actually was. Because you and I, we have the Bible. You and I can pull up the Bible app on our phone. We can YouTube the Bible Project. We can look up accessible records and dialogues and resources. And we have all of that in the 21st century. But you have to remember that new Christians, early Christians, after Jesus, remember, laid his life down, went back to heaven after coming back from death. We get so kind of callous to this because we've seen the Easter story so many times, but you have to, kind of just rewind it back and put yourself in those shoes. These people who were, this letter's being written to were Christians, yes, but this was new to them. This was all new. They were still trying to sort out and kind of make heads or tails of this whole thing of like, okay, yes, we have known because our granddaddies said, there's somebody coming. They're going to call him Messiah. He's going to redeem humanity. Yep, we know it. Insert Jesus, starts taking H2O, turning it into Merlot, feeding thousands of people with Long John Silver's kids' meals. He's doing all this stuff. He then starts saying, I'm God, goes to the cross, comes back to life. And they're like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's the Jesus we've been hearing about. That's the Jesus we've been talking about. Okay, I'm in it. Here's my chips. Yep, let's do this. But they're still trying to sort out, okay, so tell me again, Jesus is God? Because they had some religious traditions that they were still kind of hanging on to. Because this idea that Jesus, consider this, that Jesus just made a way to them, that God, through the person and work and salvation in Jesus, actually made a way directly to them, was still a little bit outside of their frame of thought. Because it's just incredible when what you've known gets flipped on its head. And all of this truth about God that you've been hearing and you've been receiving and you've been consuming comes in full view, brought to life through the person of Jesus. And it changes everything. Why? We say it all the time. Jesus changes everything. And so the author here is writing to this group of people, and he's trying to explain to them just all the nuances and the reality that Jesus is God. And this week, we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 4, in verse 14. And just a few verses that I guarantee you, I know as I've prayed over this, I knew coming into this week, I knew with what people, everybody walks in the door to church carrying some type of life backpack with them. And we've all got one on, and it's got some stuff in it. And it's whatever we're carrying on through this world. And this week, this passage of Scripture, I'm going to tell you right now, is going to help lighten the load of that backpack. I can promise you that, because we're going to learn something about Jesus that most of us don't even consider. You ready? Here we go. In verse 14, Hebrews chapter 4. You ready? Here it is. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I want you guys to hear this, because this is it. This is it. We're going to plant our roots right here in this phrase. You ready? What does he say? Let us hold fast our confession. Do you know what that phrase means in its original language? What that's saying, that hold fast, because you're thinking, okay, if I hold something, I'm standing still, so I'm not moving, so I'm not fast, so it seems like an oxymoron, because I feel like if I grab a hold of something and then I start running real quick, I'm gonna let go of the something that I'm holding on to, because I know how physics works. You guys understand what I'm saying, right? You've seen races. It's kind of hard. You see somebody running a race and their tag is like flapping around and you're like, I don't think that hold, you know what I'm saying? No. Listen to what it says. Let us hold fast our confession. You know what it means when it was written a long time ago? You know what it means? It means this: to remain fixtured to. That's what that phrase means. So what the author is saying here is, listen, this confession that Jesus is God, if you want to get through this life, because, here it is. You ready? Because here's one's for free. This one's for free. You ready? Knowing Jesus as your Savior will get you into heaven. But following Jesus as your Lord will get you through life. When he says, hold fast, he's saying, listen, remain fixtured to this truth. And what is that truth? That Jesus is this new high priest. Now, for those of us, that can sound kind of just funky a little bit, because we're like, okay, Jesus, high priest, but wasn't Jesus in temples? Didn't he like turn over tables? And wasn't he kind of challenging? Didn't he kind of throw it at some religious officials? So Jesus, high priest, how does that gel? I don't really understand. And you would be very much like the intended audience here, because Jesus as a high priest was an odd thought to them. Because in their minds, they had this idea of what a priest was, and that was not Jesus. And so for a lot of the people hearing this, as kind of unconventional as this is going to sound, for a lot of people hearing this, calling Jesus high priest was almost like ascribing a nickname to Jesus. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we don't think that sometimes. You're like, whoa, no. Is it sacrilegious to say that Jesus has a nickname? But consider this. There are many names for God. You and I know them all the time. He is mighty. We just sang a mighty warrior, right? There are songs like that. He is a just God. He is the good shepherd. He is a good father, right? We know this. He is the king. He is the lion and the lamb. We have all sorts of nicknames with God, and you and I understand that. But what we forget sometimes is the purpose of a nickname. See, maybe you grew up in a family like I did, where the purpose of a nickname was just where your uncles got to make fun of you. But for the most part, nicknames reflect the character of something. Do you understand what I mean? Nicknames typically reflect the character. Maybe growing up, you did something repeatedly. Like my mom called me Scoot. That was my nickname. She fortunately for me one time in an all-star baseball game decided to yell that out. And so my entire team of 12-year-old boys for the rest of the year called me Scoot. That was awesome. And it was because she said when I was little, I didn't crawl. I would scoot around on my bottom like a weirdo. She was like, I knew my kid was the weirdest one in the room from day one, right? But we all understand nicknames. My dad had the nickname Sarge. Now, the obvious reason for that is because my dad was a sergeant in the United States Army, but he had gotten out of the Army years before he earned the nickname Sarge, and he earned the nickname Sarge with my high school football team. And the reason he earned the nickname Sarge is because of his behavior. I'll never forget, this has been decades, and I will never forget this story as long as I live, because it is the most bizarre story about my father that I can recall. My dad was very much a creature of habit, and he liked things his way. He was very stern and to the point. He was a man of very few words, and when he said something, he did not repeat himself. He would just give you the dad stare. So if he said something and you wanted to question it or argue it, he would either just stare at you or walk away. Because in his mind, it was, I have spoken. It's like that little dude in The Mandalorian, right? I have spoken, right? That's just what he was. Some of you got that. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, that's what it was. And I'll never forget, my buddy, his name was Timmy. We played football together in high school. And Timmy, I'll never forget, one weekend, he was going to stay over at my house. And that afternoon, he drove to the store and he bought these things called Swiss cake rolls. I don't know if you know if that's still a thing or not, but he bought these Swiss rolls and he told me, he said, Scott, listen, I've got a snack for us tonight. I'm so excited. I mean, we were so cool. Our Friday night was as wild as going bowling and then coming home and eating Swiss cake rolls. We were party animals, what can I say? And so he bought his Swiss cake rolls and he said, Scott, listen, I need to go to your house and put them in the refrigerator. Because when they're cold, it's heaven on earth. And I was like, you're pretty into these Swiss rolls, so sure, man, go to the house, back door's unlocked, go in. And Timmy was at the house a lot, and so he went in and he put his Swiss rolls in the fridge. Well, that night we got home at like 11 o'clock. Everybody was asleep. We tranced in, and my dog's all licking us and saying hey and everything. And we go downstairs to my room, and we get kind of settled in. We put a movie on, and he looks at me and goes, oh, man, oh. And he got excited. I mean, it was like Christmas Eve, right? And it was just a regular Friday. He was like, oh, I got my Swiss rolls. I got my Swiss rolls. And I was like, dude, okay, I need to tell you something. He was like, no, tell me when we get back. Tell me when I get back. And he was getting ready to go downstairs. Like, no, seriously, dude. I need to tell you something before you go upstairs. He was like, what, man, what? I said, just be very, very quiet. And he goes, why? I was like, well, Buddy, that's my dad. I was like, Buddy has ears like a ninja. He knows when you're out there. And he's looking at me. He thinks that I'm messing with him. He thinks I'm trying to pull a joke on him. And I'm like, no, seriously, man. It's like he can sense it. So be super quiet. Because my dad had a rule that Timmy was about to learn. And I'll never forget. He said, oh, man, I'll be as quiet as can be. I think he tripped up the stairs. I think he actually physically tripped up the stairs. I was like, we're done. You've already lost, right? Like, game over for you already, man. He gets up the stairs into the kitchen. He told me, because 60 seconds later, he comes walking back in my room with no Swiss rolls, no glass of milk that he was so excited for, and the most terrified, defeated look on his face that I had ever seen. And he looks at me, he goes, Sarge got me. I said, yeah, what happened? He said, Scott, I opened the refrigerator. He's so animated too. He's like, I opened the refrigerator. And he actually says this. And the glow of the light was on me. So all I could see was the light of the refrigerator. And I was looking for the Swiss rolls. And all of a sudden, I just heard, kitchen's closed. He said, I got so scared, I dropped the milk. I had to pick it back up, and he said, Scott, I shut the door, and there was the silhouette of your dad standing there over me. And he said, kitchen's closed. And he just stood there. So I had to put everything back and come back down here. Because see, my dad had a rule that in our house, you were not allowed to go into the kitchen and get anything after 9 o'clock p.m. Why? No one to this day knows. No one knows. And so from that day forward, my dad was known not just to Timmy, but every other friend in my life as Sarge, because Sarge had rules and Sarge did not play when it came to his rules. See, we understand that nicknames reflect the character of the thing about which they are named. And so if you're the intended audience here in Hebrews, you're kind of hearing this as, okay, so we have a great high priest who is, okay, yep, so it's Jesus, Son of God, great high priest. Okay, but here's what I know a priest to be, so help me understand what it is. Because the Hebrew people, right, at this time, what they would understand a priest to be, because in its original kind of function, it was meant to be a mediator. The priest was meant to be a go-between. If that makes sense. In fact, from the original Hebrew language, it's kind of what we take out from that is this phrase, what the word priest actually means, translates to draw near. And I know you're thinking like, that doesn't make sense. Why would a priest mean to draw near, because I think of a priest as being an overseer, right? Maybe a spiritual advisor or some type of religious overseer. And so we hear that and we think, well, he's a new high priest. I don't necessarily understand what that means, but here's how that kind of breaks down for us. See, if you were a Hebrew Christian at this time, your understanding of what a priest did was literally to draw you near to God. So what you have to understand, if we can kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the audience here, is the people receiving this letter, the people receiving this instruction, this news, so to speak, about Jesus and how to see Jesus, what they would have known a high priest as is they would have known the high priest as the one who carried their sacrifices into the throne room of God. And here's what that means. In the Old Testament, the people needed to be with God. And even though God was everywhere, they were instructed to set up what was called a tabernacle. Translate now, a couple thousand years later, it's a church, right? And so it was a place of worship. It was a place of corporate gathering. And it was a place wherein sacrifices to God would be offered. Because this is before Jesus, and so in order for the people, as kind of the law was handed down, in order for them to, quote, draw near or make their way to God, or, quote, get right with God, they would need a priest to bring their sacrifices into what was called the Holy of Holies. It was the place in the tabernacle that no one could go. In fact, there was only one person allowed in there, and it was the high priest. And he was only allowed in there once a year, where he would essentially bring in the sacrifices people would have as kind of this atonement for sin. And in this Holy of Holies, in this room, in this throne room, as it were, they kept the Ark of the Covenant. Maybe you've seen Indiana Jones, you have an idea of what I'm talking about, but in the Ark of the Covenant, there were things that were of extreme intrinsic value to the Hebrew people, to the Israelite people, things like the Ten Commandments. Do you understand what I'm saying? This was a place that was holy, set apart. One person once a year would go in there, and that was this high priest. And it was such a big deal. The glory of God was seen. We do this. Come on now. We come into church and we sing songs, and we kind of just some kind of haphazardly sing some songs, or we don't even consider when we talk about how great God is. God is God. He made everything. He made the very moon and stars you're going to see when you walk out today. The sun you see when you walk out today. The ocean that's 20 minutes to the left of us. He made that. He is great. He is over all things. And the Israelite people knew of his glory because the Israelite people would have heard the stories. All the folk songs that their granddaddies passed down that we know as psalms, they would have heard all these. They would have heard the stories of David. They would have heard the stories of Abraham. They would have heard the stories of Gideon and these kind of mighty men of God. They would have heard these. They would have heard what God did in the lives of the people and how God was showing off his faithfulness and his glory, and they would have understood this. And so for them, this understanding of a priest walking into the Holy of Holies was such an awe and just consuming, overwhelming. I can't quite get my head around the glory of God because no one goes in there except the high priest. It was such a big deal that when the high priest would go in there, no joke, what they would do is they would tie a rope around him and they would put bells on the rope, right? So next time you think of Christmas and you hear jingle bells, you're going to think of a high priest in the tabernacle, right? And he's just jingling, just walking in there, right? He's got bells on him. Do you know why? The reason that he had bells is because they thought if the high priest enters into the Holy of Holies and his spirit is not right with God, God may strike him down dead. And none of us can go in there to get him because none of us are allowed in there. So we're going to tie a rope around him because if those bells stop chiming, we need to drag him out of there. That's how serious it was. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's how serious it was. This high priest was a courier of confession, so to speak. He was a courier of the sacrifices. He was a courier of the confessions that people would come and to make their sins right with God is kind of how we understand that. And he would bring that into the Holy of Holies. So when we hear that this phrase, he's the high priest to draw near, that is exactly what a high priest did. Are you tracking with what I'm saying? That is exactly what a high priest did. So as the author is kind of relaying this, he's saying, look, we have a great high priest. And he's passed through the heavens. He didn't come from the ground up. He came from the heaven down. That's what he's saying. He says, we have a new high priest. It's Jesus, the Son of God. So let's remain fixated to this confession that we know Jesus is God. For I love this. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find help in time of need. Why would Jesus be called the high priest to these people? Why would the author write this? Because if you go through the rest of Hebrews, which is what we're doing in this series, you're going to see that Jesus is called the high priest 12 times. 12 times he's going to be called the high priest, almost as though the author is saying, listen to this. It matters. If someone repeats themselves, it's because they want you to know the thing they are repeating. I have to repeat myself with my kids all the time. Most of the time, recently with my son, the thing I repeat is this: what'd I just say? A lot of being a parent is just repeating that phrase over and over again. What'd I just say? I will tell my son to do something, and he's a very smart kid. He's a very logical kid, and so he wants to argue, but he's not trying to argue necessarily against what you're saying. He'll argue the semantics. Like, he's that kid who already knows the difference between affect and effect, right? Like, he's that kid. Some of you are like, dude, I'm a grown-up. I don't even know what the difference is. He does. He's just that kid. He just knows it. And so if you say something, he'll be like, but Dad, that's not what you said. And I'm like, stop mincing words with me, bro. Do what I tell. And it's all about just, hey, man, just put your shoes on. And he's like, but Dad, it's not shoes. They're Crocs. And I was like, I can't. So I spend time, instead of repeating myself, now I've just gotten to the point where I just look at him and I'm like, dude, what'd I just say? What did I just say? And then I can hear my parents saying that to me. And then it comes eerily creeping back that I was that kid too. And then I can hear also my parents say, you reap what you sow. And I find myself repeating things. But see, the author of Hebrews, he repeats that Jesus is the high priest. Why? Why would he do that? You know why? Because of this. He wants us to hold fast to our confession. He wants us to remain fixtured to this truth. You ready? Because here it is. He's been laying it out for several chapters, and he's going to continue to lay it out for more and more chapters to come. Here it is. Jesus was perfectly divine and perfectly human. He was the living presence of God on this earth. And he was the living sacrifice for the sins of mankind. Jesus was not some faraway God that needed someone else to help draw the people near to him. No. It's actually what separates Christianity from every other religion on planet Earth. Religion says you have to make your way to God. And Christianity says God has made a way to you through the person and work and salvation in Jesus, through his love and his grace and his mercy. He made a way to you. And he is drilling on this. He is drilling on this hard. See, Jesus could speak to mankind as God because Jesus is the very revelation of God. So not only could Jesus speak to mankind as God, he could also stand and did also stand in the place of mankind's sins when he paid the ultimate price so God could make a way to us. What did Jesus do? Listen, listen, high priest. What did Jesus do? Draw near. See, that word priest means to draw near. What did Jesus do? He did just that. He did just that. See, there was a veil, there was a partition, there was a thing that separated the rest of the tabernacle, the rest of the people from the Holy of Holies. And Jesus said, and took it down. He completely took it down. I just had a conversation with a man this last week, and he grew up Catholic, and so he was asking me questions about Jesus because he was terribly interested as he's kind of figuring out his journey with Jesus right now. He has years of growing up in a Catholic family, and so recently has chosen to surrender his life to Jesus. He has chosen to believe in the gospel of Jesus. But much like all of us, he's still learning what that journey with Jesus looks like. And it's so funny because we're sitting around his kitchen table the other day, and you and I, and don't lose track of this. When I say hold fast, I mean hold fast to this. Stay fixated on this. He said something to me that even in my shoes, I needed to hear. You've heard me make this joke. It's a dorky dad pastor joke, right? I'm a professional Christian, and I still need to hear this, right? Like I still need to be consumed. I still need to get fixated on this truth. He's sitting there having a conversation with me, and he says, Scott, it's so funny. And he starts laughing. He starts laughing like a kid laughs when he gets excited. You ever had that happen? Maybe you growing up and your parents came home and they said, hey, we're going to take you to fill in the blank, whatever your favorite restaurant was, and it surprised you, and you just got all giddy. You got all happy and excited. I did that for my kids the other day. I drove through the store and I got them each their favorite little like candy treat because my wife told me not to, and I did, and that's how you flirt after you've been married for 16 years, as you make each other mad on purpose. And so I brought them some candy, and they were so excited, right? They were so excited. And this man, he's sitting there. I'm at his kitchen table, and he's laughing. He goes, Scott, it's just so crazy to me that like right now, if I want to talk to God, I can talk to God. I mean, he's giving me like the Seinfeld arms. You know what I mean? He's like, I can talk to God. I can do it. And I'm like, yeah. I remember just thinking, yeah, it's weird that you're so excited about this. But it wasn't weird that he was so excited about this. You know why? It wasn't lost on him. He was fixtured to this. He said, Scott, no matter what I'm going through, I can talk to God. God, I can talk to God. And as we sat there at his kitchen table eating cheese and crackers, grown men eating cheese and crackers at his kitchen table, just looking at him, just thinking, yeah, we can talk to God. Because we have a new high priest who took the veil down, who has drawn us near to God. See, God's already near. It's up to us to hold fast to that confession so that with confidence, now it's up to us to draw near to the throne of grace. Because now the door is always open. God never leaves your texts on read. Yeah, you're right. He doesn't do that. He always gets it. He always gets it. Because he has already drawn near to us. It's up to us to draw near to him. Why is he called a high priest? What does he say? We don't have a high priest who can't sympathize with our weakness. Listen, the high priest, it's not a knock on the high priest back then, but you need to understand the reality of what he's saying here. The high priest back in the day, rope, bells, the whole bit. That man had no idea what you were going through. You just came in to pay your penance, so to speak, and his job was just to be the courier. But he wasn't walking in your shoes. He hadn't been tempted the way you'd been tempted. He hadn't made the decisions that you had made. He hadn't understood your shoes. He didn't know your private thoughts. He didn't know your behind-the-scene actions. He didn't know any of that. But see, Jesus is God. Jesus knows all of that. Why? Jesus knew your past before it would be your past and still gave everything to be everything in your future. That's how much Jesus knows you. And so when he says we have a high priest who he doesn't struggle to sympathize with who we are. No. We have a new high priest who knows us. How often does that get lost on us? And how many of us, come on now, how many of us this week need to have a cheese and crackers, coffee table, kitchen table conversation where we kind of just laugh and it hits us and we're just, I can talk to God. I can go to God. I'm not alone in this. He gets it. He understands. He made the way. He's already, wait, hold on. He knew that I would do. Yeah. He knew that this would happen to me. Yeah. He knew that I would. Yeah. He knew that I thought. He knew. Yeah. He knew. And he still made a way so you could draw near to God. Why? He knows you and he loves you anyway. And this truth is something that we cannot just let wash over us. We need to hold fast to it. Hold firmly, perpetually, remain fixated on it. See, the Christian life can basically be summed up into 3 words: became, become, and response. See, Jesus became sin so that we could become children of God. And as he has drawn near to us, our life is a response to that love and mercy and grace. So no matter what you're walking through, no matter what's in your life backpack that you're carrying around right now, Jesus knows and cares. And he knows and he's there. See, here's the truth. For every one of us, do not let it wash over you. You ready? Here it is. We have a great high priest, Jesus, the Son of God. A great high priest who knows us and loves us. See, Jesus knows who you are, loves you anyway, and wants to lead you his way. I'm going to say that again because you need to understand this, because it is, I would argue, the most pivotal thing you can listen to this week. Jesus knows who you are, loves you anyway, and leads you his way. See, Jesus doesn't leave you out in the great room. He brings you in to the throne room. Jesus doesn't leave you out to wander and wonder if you have what it takes to be loved by God. No. He doesn't leave you out there. He brings you right in through the cross. He brings you right there. See, here it is. Here it is. Jesus is not only aware of your pain, Jesus is active in your progress. See, he knows your hurts, your habits, and your hang-ups. And he offers help, healing, and hope. Because Jesus is the great high priest. That's the word for all of us this week. The word for all of us this week was my prayer is that in a larger setting, we got to have a kitchen table, cheese and crackers conversation where we sat together and we realized Jesus is God and I can go to God with whatever it is that I'm carrying in my backpack. God is there. Let me pray for you and we'll continue to worship.